Hi, everyone. Good morning or early afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Welcome to our panel on striking the balance between meeting or managing owners' expectations while also driving operational excellence. My name is Kerrie Racicot. I will be moderating the panel today. I'm with Tahoe Truckee Vacation Properties in North Lake Tahoe and Truckee. We manage 270 properties. We are a family business with second generation leadership and have had most of our growth through either organic growth or actually acquiring smaller businesses within our market. I'm really excited to be just having a discussion with these folks today. They're going to be amazing. We're going to take a quick minute for introductions, starting with Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Smith. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and General Manager for Seaside Vacations in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. I've been in the business for about 25 years, and we currently manage 470 homes.
Awesome. Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Vozar. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development, Owner Relations here at Cabins for You, Vacations for You. We have 3 areas of operation, and we manage currently around 660 properties.
Awesome. Ben.
I'm Ben Edwards. I'm the Managing Director of Towne Vacations. We have 6 locations throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. We manage about 2,800 doors.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. So, yeah, in an ever-changing landscape in our industry, managing owner expectations is really important. We've gone through a lot through COVID, regulatory issues in many of our markets. And so I think that we all probably have a lot to provide today, especially dealing with like new owners that maybe came on during the pandemic or post-pandemic, and then also legacy owners. So to get started, I'd like to know, how are you all setting expectations from the start when you're building these new owner relationships? How are you establishing trust and rapport with them and kind of letting them know what's to be expected as they join your company? Lori, would you like to start with that one?
Sure, yeah. So we have a process that we tour the homes with the owners after they onboard with us. We call them property coordinators. They're essentially a property manager, but they're the primary point of contact for the homeowner. And so as soon as possible, we set up that on-site meeting and do a walkthrough of the home, get to understand pet peeves, maybe if there's something that's of sentimental value in the home that we need to keep an extra eye on. And so that's really, we talk about their goals for their home, long-term and short-term. So like, what's your revenue goals this year? What are your long-term goals? Is this someplace you're going to be retiring in 10 years? Or is it just an investment property you're going to sell off after 2 or 3? And so with that information, it really lets us know which pathway to lean into. Are we mainly talking about like revenue importance, or are we talking about the home as a home that somebody cares about a lot, and that will be spending a lot of personal time there? So
Yeah, great. So just kind of really getting to know the owner at the onset and what they're looking for. And I think, Ben, you had mentioned in our earlier conversations that that front end communication is really important for you guys.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to establish a foundation with the homeowner where we take our business very seriously. So we are trying to establish the professional partner relationship. One thing, there's no shortage of great discussion points to have with the homeowner, but what we don't do is we don't establish a relationship predicated on price. And I'm going to kind of veer off script here and tell you what not to do. Too many vacation rental managers in the industry establish a relationship based upon price, where it's a discount commission structure or some type of guarantee or what have you. Once you establish a relationship predicated on price, it's always about price, and that really negates the goal of having owners on your program for an extended period of time. We have a really long tenure of homeowners because we treat them as partners. We honestly, as hokey as it sounds, try to treat the property as if it's ours, be their advocate in a lot of cases. So, I'm sitting in Destin, Florida right now, and we're just inundated with new entrants to the marketplace who think they have a better mousetrap doing it at cut rate commissions, and they either go out of business or they have to literally double their fee structure moving forward. And it's just not conducive to a sustainable business operation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a pretty hard line on not negotiating on commission, and it's not because I don't think the homeowner is worth it or the house is worth it or anything like that. It's really about what is the expectation. Our value is not in our price, or our value exceeds our price, I should say. And I found that the owners where you do that negotiation tend to try to negotiate every point from then on, and it doesn't
Agreed.
establish a very strong foundation from the beginning. So I totally hear you on that, Ben. Kevin, what about you?
You know, I look at when I'm vetting a new owner, you know, I immediately try to identify, is this an investor owner or a familial owner? Because we have two types here, and each one has a different track, and each one have different desires and what they're trying to achieve for their property. So it goes just like y'all were saying, you know, it's asking those probing questions, but asking questions of them that perhaps other property managers aren't willing to ask, or maybe they're afraid to ask. Like, you know, what motivated you to buy a vacation rental property? You know, what are you hoping to achieve by owning it? You know, what is your risk tolerance? What is your just your overall, you know, tolerance to loss and for other things that not all owners or buyers should be in the short-term vacation rental space. So I try to, you know, ask those questions on the front end and then work my way through the type of owner it is. And I find that that's the best way to go. And again, a lot of my local competitors, even some of the national competitors in our area, are afraid to ask those questions. They go straight to, well, we're big, we're this, we're that, but they don't dig deep as to what's in the psyche of the owner or the buyer and try to understand where they're coming from and try to work with them. And then you can build a plan for them that's, with a unique value or service proposition, then as you've all said, and then work your way into the numbers. The numbers are the easy part, right? The numbers are easy. It's that unique value and service proposition that separates you from your competitors, whether again, it's a familial owner or it's an investor owner.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add something to that. So totally agree with Kevin. There's a book called Getting Naked, and it's about being vulnerable in business and not being afraid to ask those questions for fear of
Okay. I
looking.
didn't know where you're going with that, Lori.
You should have seen me when they handed me the book. But no, it's about being vulnerable in business and not being afraid to ask those probing questions that so many people are afraid of asking for fear of it making you look like you don't know what you're talking about, right? Like a lot of businesses go in and they think that they have to have all of the answers, but it's just not the case. And actually asking those questions and understanding the real need is what helps you develop a more personal working relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what develops trust. Many companies don't ask those personal questions, and now your owner feels like you've taken the time to really get to know them and understand their wants and needs. We are in primarily a familial second home market, very, very few investors. And so there's such a personal aspect to these houses with these owners. So I really love new owner conversations. Those are some of my favorite. And partly because it's where I do get to set the expectations. And especially when it's so personal, I'm not afraid to have a hard conversation. I'm not afraid to say something about what they can expect that might make them not want to sign up with us or choose not to rent their home. That's for the better, because those are even harder conversations to have later when you're defensive, right? When they come home and the spatula's in the wrong drawer and they're freaking out and you didn't tell them about the kitchen chaos that they're going to expect. Whereas, an investor mindset's a little bit different. And so taking that time at the beginning to have that hard conversation just sets everyone up for success. So I'm wondering, how do these are kind of new owners we're talking about, but what about your legacy owners? What about owners that have been with you for years, before Airbnb was as prolific, before there was regulation, before the expectation of guests became more hotel-like and not I'm renting somebody's home-like? How have you kept your owners in alignment with the industry changes and your business changes?
Yeah,
Well, I guess
go ahead, Kevin.
Go ahead, Ben. No, okay. You know what I do, maybe a little different than some of my local and national competitors, is one, I do a quarterly market paper for our owners that I talk about what's going on, what's happened in the last quarter, what we're anticipating happening in the next quarter. And it keeps them up to speed with not just trends in the industry, but perhaps trends in property types, property quality, amenities. If you haven't, I do use key data quite a bit, in fact, daily in what I do. And if those of you listening don't subscribe to key data, I would heartily want you to do that, because I can give owners these market reports, and then so they're kept up to date on a quarterly basis, so they aren't ever left in the lurch or on an island by themselves, not knowing what's going on. And then, of course, I always use my pat line that, past history is no guarantee of future performance.
I love that.
STRs are an investment. All investments have risk. They may not have market correlated style risk, but they all have risk. They've got regulatory risk. They've got supply demand risk. They've got, different types of risk, perhaps, your traditional market investments, but letting owners know that these are not guaranteed investments, that things happen, and setting that example, not just in the beginning, but ongoing, tends to help me a lot with working with our legacy owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Getting kind of ahead of that, but not asking you why they're making less money or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else have a way that they maintain?
Yeah, I think it sums it up pretty well. I think the key to a successful owner relationship is proactive communication and consistently performing, your role as a partner. The consistency ultimately creates trust, and trust is what you're trying to build. And so, understanding your homeowner is paramount. We classify owners into 3 separate categories, so we know how to speak with that particular owner, and that's really determined at the onset of a relationship. And so, going to a homeowner that doesn't want sneakers on their carpet unless you hit $2,500 a night with some cut rate price is just bad business, right? You're not hearing or listening rather to your homeowner. So we really try to nose in on the relationship, creating that consistency, which in turn creates trust.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think part of that proactive communication is proactively communicating issues within their own property, things that you see happening, a trend that's going on before they either feel the effect of a revenue decrease or they arrive to their property and, find things not as they expected them to be. So not being afraid to have those conversations either. Mm-hmm. Laura, you have quite a few legacy homeowners. How have you dealt with the changes with them?
We do. And I'll say when it comes to change, like as slow as you can possibly roll it out, the better. And that's really the strategy that we've used in the past. When we went in our market, we're a very traditional market, a lot of 7-night stays. We were one of the first companies to open things up to that we call them any day stays. So, 3 nights, 4 nights, partial weeks. So, and doing that, like we started talking about it and sending it was in all of our communications to our owners. Something about short stays was in everything. And then we started out with like 12 owners agreeing to let us rent their house for shorter stays. And then we were able to build some case studies and show the owners the data. And so that's when it comes to like building trust and establishing relationships, a lot of times sticking to the facts, right? And providing your evidence up front just strengthens your argument and shows them that you know what you're talking about, that you're an authority on the material that they're looking at, and that it does a lot for your trust. So,
and
yeah,
to follow up on this, another thing that we found helpful and we're trying to implement, although it's a little bit of a slow burn, is, like you're always told, have an annual review with your insurance agent, have an annual review with your investment advisor. We want to have an annual review with all of our owners over the phone and talk about, have their goals changed, have their lives changed, and things like that, because owning this is not a static investment, right? This is a living and breathing, it has a lot of dynamics involved. And when, family issues change or investors change or anything else changes, having those one-on-one annual reviews with the owner to make sure that you're still aligned with what each party is trying to do. And that's something that we're trying to do. It's kind of a slow burn because it's new. It's something that we haven't done before to that level, but it's something that we're excited to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you all have mentioned this one way or another in this conversation, and we do have a similar follow-up question. We have varying markets, varying owners, different backgrounds, different times on market, different needs and wants. How are you adapting to each of their personalities, knowing how to speak with them? Ben, you mentioned classifying them. Can you talk a little bit about that? And how does your team know how to treat each owner differently while maintaining equal standards across your entire portfolio?
I think first off, it really starts by again listening. I was closing a transaction probably it's 10 or 15 years ago. A guy in Palm Springs had pulled on 400 plus homes in that market. Amazing business development guy, right? So what's the key to pulling on properties? And he said, "Oh, well, I listen to the homeowners." I said, "Okay, that's great." And so first off, you got to really understand what the predicate for being in the relationship may be, and then understanding. And this is kind of a take on Jamie Kubicek's book of 5 gears, but you've got your first gear, second gear, and third gear homeowners, right? The first gear homeowner tells you it's not about money, it's only about the care and maintenance of the property, right? And we all know that's a lie, but that's what they come to the table with. And so knowing that when you approach them is really, really paramount. The second gear is kind of that middle of the road. Husband wants to really rent. The wife's like, this is not a rental, it's our second home, right? So you've got to navigate that. And third gear is your investment homeowner, where he's like, look, you've got to rent it, nonstop. I want it rented. So understanding how to communicate and within that context is really important moving forward. And I think as a whole, the industry allows, $30,000 to $40,000 a year people who don't own a home to try to communicate with people that own, I don't know, $500 to $5 million investments. And I think it's really establishing the right protocol and the right people to communicate attributes of your business and really exude that care and attention that everybody wants. I mean, money's number one, but care and attention to the property is number two. I think it's making sure you get the right person on the bus communicating with the homeowner and then understanding what their wants and needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. I have basically owner managers, or I think you have property care managers. And they have a portfolio, and their job is to get to know that homeowner, to develop that relationship. We all talk about this is a partnership. We're not working for them, they're not working for us. We're doing this together to meet their goals, to meet our goals. And having proactive owner relation building is huge. If you see that they're in town, see if they want to go get a coffee, invite them by the office, really get to know them on a human level and not just as like a number on the spreadsheet. And that really develops that trust and rapport over time, but also the ability to have hard conversations because you respect each other and care about each other. So that's one of the tools that we've used with our portfolio, is just to really treat our owners like, they're part of our work family, and they are. Lori or Kevin, do you have anything to add to how to deal with different types of owners and personalities?
I would say this: when I'm onboarding a new owner, I set boundaries.
Absolutely.
Again, sometimes we have owners who think that you are their indentured servant, that you should be on call for them 24/7 and do everything for them. Whereas I really want my owner account reps to have a life. I want them to have a work. I know it's overused, a work-life balance, but I set the boundaries up front. You know, I give them my folks' work hours. If there's an emergency after hours, this is the number to call. If you are in any way abusive to one of my owner account reps, you're going to have to deal with me, because I will delist you in a second if you are disrespectful to my people or use foul language, you know, or, you know, make, you know, over and over, you know, just unreasonable requests. Sometimes, you know, a bad client is a bad client. Sometimes a bad owner is a bad owner, and you just have to send them down the road, because your time is much too valuable to deal with the good owners than having all, you know, having those vampires suck all of your time and energy, then, you know, that you could devote to your owners who have that same appreciation and respect for you and for what you do. So that's sometimes hard, you know, when you're worried about doors and counts, but, you know, sometimes you got to do what's right for your business and not always the owner's business.
It's so true. I think I was told really early on in my career that the most powerful thing you can do is say no to business. And I would encourage newer property managers to not be afraid to say no early on, because these are long-term relationships. And vampires is right, Kevin. Like, they are taking away from your time to love on the owners that are in alignment with you for those ones that are not in alignment. So get rid of them quickly if they're disrespectful, if they're just not on board. And if Lori and I talked about this a little bit, don't maybe question yourself a little bit. Is there a process that we can change? Why am I saying no to this request? How can we improve? You know, don't just get rid of somebody because they don't align with your system. See if your system can accommodate them. But if they are berating, if they just shouldn't be renting their house, like, you know, cut them loose.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's something I take a lot of pride in how flexible my company is, right? Like, we can say yes a lot. And I love being able to say yes and finding the solutions. But there are certain lines that you can't cross. And so, you know, cursing at my staff or, you know, those sort of things, we have enough homes. We don't need that one. And I'll just say, you know, at the end of the day, it is all about building relationships. And through our property coordinator system, we know that not all personalities are going to match, right? They're not going to mesh well. They may not be able to develop a meaningful relationship that that we can work with. So we, you know, some place that we're flexible is among that team, actually. Like, there have been times where an owner is just like, I just cannot work with that employee. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? We knew this was a possibility. Let's move you to this person. And a lot of times we're able to establish a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And just shameless plug, Breezeway is what lets us be super flexible with how we accommodate homeowners' needs. We can have our standard practice, our best practices, everything, you know, is equitable, I guess, amongst our properties. When an owner has a very specific need that many other companies are saying, no, we cannot do that. We can, because it's systematized. Like, we plug it in, property specific tasks, and bam, like, we'll never miss it. And that flexibility that Breezeway has allowed us has really let us grow and make personalization scalable, which is huge. Shameless plug for you, Corinne.
I love it. Right as I came in, it was like perfect timing. Perfect timing. Hey, I did see one question in there I think is really interesting. And I know we're wrapping it up, but around like the number of properties your homeowner relations folks are managing. You guys want to kind of share that real quick and before we jump out?
We are roughly 100 a person, but they have a full staff that's doing all like maintenance coordination, housekeeping coordination, guest services. So they're really just in charge of the owner's experience and kind of being high level project management for each homeowner. I personally could do 160. That's where my brain broke. And then I scale it down to 100 for my owner managers.
Awesome. Anybody, one more person want to give, if it's drastically different, you want to jump in? Otherwise we'll.
Yeah, we're generally 20 to 40, depending on the dispersion of the properties.
We're about 75.
Yeah, ideally we're 60, but we're closer to 80 in reality.